I'm really curious about how you're thinking about SCOTUS punting again for a second time, right? This ruling on whether the president's use of IEPA to prosecute tariffs is legal, is constitutional, or not. What are they doing? Why are they slow walking this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're slow walking. I mean, this is an incredibly important judgment for them. I think they are trying to at least give the perception of being very intentional and very deliberate. I think the point, though, for markets here is that if and when SCOTUS does render a verdict, and we're expecting it, if not this week, then next week, over the next 2 weeks or so, even if they do find that the president violated the law and that he can't use IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, kind of a mouthful, to impose tariffs, there are many other tools at President Trump's disposal. And this, I think, is the most important thing for markets to realize, because I think that there probably will be some market reaction should the Supreme Court rule the way that we think they will, again, probably against the president, at least in some sort of form or fashion.
But that reaction will be very brief.
Exactly. I think that, you could see risk assets rally. You could see the yield curve in the U.S. steepen as the concerns about the deficits come back on the front burner. But again, we would sort of discount that because we believe, and I think that the U.S. Trade Representative has said this both publicly and then in private conversations, that there are other tools that they will impose and immediately. Yes.
So let's talk about that. Among those tools, right? And there's quite an arsenal, all right? A lot of tools in the toolkit or box. They could do Section 301, 338, 232. There's any number of ways, half a dozen ways they could continue to prosecute tariffs, right?
Yeah, and I think what folks have suggested in the administration is that they would impose blanketed tariffs using Section 122, a very sort of obscure trade provision that would allow the president to impose 15% tariffs on basically all goods that are coming from countries with whom we have the U.S. has a trade deficit, but it's time limited. They can only put the 15% on for 5 months. And so we think that they'll kind of use that as a bridge to then these Section 301, Section 232s, product-specific and then country-specific tariffs. So again, I think the bottom line here is that this president loves tariffs. He says that over and over again. We have to believe him. He believes that tariffs are not only a means to an end in terms of extracting concessions from negotiating partners, but also an end unto themselves. And this is what I think the market sometimes wants to ignore. But he really does believe that this is as good of a destination as it is as a tool to get concessions.
So here's the thing, right? I want to bounce this idea off you. We were talking to a gentleman from Moody's not so long ago, a couple hours ago, in fact, and he was actually optimistic that, the Trump administration would not turn to those other half a dozen other ways to prosecute tariffs. What you're talking about, 122, 232, 301, 338, or maybe even a couple other ones, right? Simply because we are in an election cycle. Midterms are 10 and a half, 11 months away, and affordability is a key issue. And whether they want to publicly acknowledge it or not, tariffs are part of this whole inflation story.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a tell because the president has walked back from some of the tariffs on coffee, on bananas, on things that the U.S. just cannot produce. So I do think that there is an understanding that in some cases tariffs do raise prices, but just generally, the president believes that tariffs work. And if you look at the latest trade deficit data in the U.S., you've actually seen the trade deficit decline. Now, we know that the president uses that as sort of an effective scorecard with the rest of the world. And so I think in his sort of framework, people may agree, may disagree with this, but I think in his framework, tariffs are working. They're bringing down that trade deficit. And again, I think what you've seen from a price perspective is that, it has incrementally increased prices in certain areas, but it has not been as inflationary as I think folks expected. Our view is that you could actually see more pain pass through to the consumer. The companies are definitely shouldering more of this tariff than they have previously in other sort of tariff bouts. So we think that they will likely pass on more on that, kind of to come. But again, the president believes in this, and we think he's going to use all the tools at his disposal. Okay. Affordability, though, is a really important focus, and happy to talk about that because I think going into the midterm elections, this president understands that, in terms of his polling, where he's the weakest is on cost of living, inflation, and the economy. And so we are expecting, and I think, again, this is something that's going to be a challenge for investors, is he's going to announce many policies over the next coming weeks The State of the Union is up in February. I think he's going to make that sort of the focus of his agenda. But a lot of these things he cannot do unilaterally.